morning, everyone. Welcome to a special edition, episode 11 of the Blowback Exposing Imperial Decline Roundtable. We have a special guest, Hamzat. He's on the street in Nigeria as we speak, walking around. There's so much to discuss, the Prigozhin affair, the BRICS summit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm gonna kick it over to Ben, and he's gonna prioritize what our first topic is. So Ben, what are we going to talk about first?
Thing, but I can bring the first topic because last night around 9-10 p.m. I was going to go to sleep and my Telegram channels, my friends just kept buzzing to life saying, plane down, Prigozhin's dead, breaking news everywhere, all over the place. And I said, okay, what the hell is going on? And I spent this morning basically tracking the news and stuff. So to bring this a little background to the whole thing. So everybody knows Prigozhin, very rich guy, restaurateur, who was the public head, the CEO of the Wagner Group, which was a private military contractor like a year ago, but basically not done by the military, but by the intelligence services. Okay, that's how it was incorporated into existence. And his private plane, very rich man, he always takes 2 planes everywhere. This happened previously in Africa. Went down, and apparently 10 people were supposed to be on board, and that includes him, the CEO. There's also another guy called Dmitry Utkin, who was the actual commander of the forces. And to this day, we have no confirmation of his body being found, being identified, nothing like that. We have rumors, and we have all the Western media. And here I want to pick out that the UK and the Europe, they went absolute batshit crazy with this, saying Putin's revenge, look, you could be next, absolutely horrific, nobody's safe. And the US was much more muted. The US said a private plane went down near Moscow in the Tver region, where Prigozhin was said to be a passenger or on the passenger list. And then there's the the New York Times said the CIA cannot confirm if he's dead or not. So till this moment, we cannot say anything definitive about the event, but this thing went down. One thing that the investigation ongoing has ruled out was air defense systems. Currently, all the marks point to a bomb on board near the, what do you call it, the front, what do you call the wheel on the airplane? The compartment where the front wheel is supposed
landing gear.
Yeah. So basically, that was hit. Part of the stabilizer and part of the wing broke off, and then it fell like a dart. It just descended for kilometers and smashed into the ground. Nobody could have survived that. Okay, so that's basically what we have done. The latest, this was just an hour ago from Slavyangrad channels, which was now on RIA Novosti, that the prime suspect is Artem Stepanov, who was the pilot, basically, and he had access to the plane. He could fiddle with it, and before the plane took off, he disappeared into Kamchatka, and the police are searching for him, and he's nowhere to be found. So we don't know what it means, but the big context, because this was on the day of BRICS, on the day of the lunar landing that India just achieved, which was amazing, the BRICS expansion. It was on the day that Russia is supposed to shine, the 80th anniversary of Kursk. Basically, when this happened last night, Putin was in front of a brand new memorial in Kursk, in front of a concert congratulating the people, giving out the Heroes of Russia award on live TV to the Alyosha tank, the tank that took out like 15 others on the battlefield. Basically, Russia was supposed to shine. So you can hedge your bets on what it has to do with, but since Hamzat is with us, I would have to say, because Wagner has been on the front news in Africa, I have a very reasonable assumption that the two places, at least the crash and Africa, are deeply intertwined in one way or the other. What are the takes on this, people?
Well, when I had the news yesterday, I actually saw it from a BBC source, and somehow I just do not want to believe the BBC. I had to double check to be sure that this is not one of those stories that are just, passing around on the internet, but eventually it turns out to be true. And a lot of mixed feelings from our side here. Firstly, it's easy to point accusing fingers at President Putin because it will seem like, based on media reports of the Putin's personality, he does not forgive. And according to one report that I saw, he said he does forgive people, but there is one thing he cannot, which is betrayal.
Yes, I saw that clip myself.
this might play into that narrative and say, oh, he cannot forgive betrayal. And because what Prigozhin seems to have led was more of a betrayal to Putin. So Putin is the number one suspect. So everyone has to point accusing finger at him and say, you did this. Now, did he do it? Nobody knows for now, at least.
In European media, you're right. That's exactly how it's framed.
Yeah. Now, but then on another perspective, we look at it, I want to look at it from an African perspective, especially on the situation currently happening, which is the spotlight, Niger Republic. You know, out of all the countries around the world, particularly in Europe or even Asia, Russia is the country that has spoken, you know, largely against the position of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. And many people can connect the fact that there has also been a report of Wagner saying they are coming to Niger Republic. I don't know how true is that, but we have seen a couple of reports that Wagner said they are willing to come to Niger Republic to support the coup leaders in the country. And we have also had Putin during the same period said that Russia is willing to support any country that wants to pursue its own independent position outside of the status quo or, you know, the general form of leadership, which the Niger Republic situation may currently fall into. And other neighboring countries like Mali and Burkina Faso and Guinea that had similar military coup, all of whom are also aligning with Russia, they are also making themselves available to support the situation in Niger Republic against the position of ECOWAS. So from this perspective, a lot of people over here feels that this would be like a call for caution, because what the military leaders in Niger, what they are relying on largely is they are relying on Wagner as their support to take on ECOWAS, because they know that Burkina Faso and Mali and Guinea, they don't necessarily have the required capacity to give them the kind of support they need, especially when a country like Nigeria is leading ECOWAS and has made commitment to lead the invasion of Niger Republic if the coup plotters didn't back down. So Wagner and by extension Russia is what the coup plotters are relying on to defend themselves. So probably many feels that the death of Prigozhin would bring about some instability in Russia at this moment, and there will be some low morals from that end, and probably that may hinder Russia's willingness to want to engage in the kind of battle that would be involving a regional bloc like ECOWAS, as well as African Union as a body. So I think this is the context for which the Prigozhin, you know, death allegedly is being perceived from this end. And I don't know how much we can take from this, but that's the perspective from here.
Good perspective. And in that perspective, I mean, how would Putin benefit from something like this? I just don't see it, you see. What you've chalked up was a net loss for Russia and a net gain for ECOWAS and the Western African countries.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm saying, like, we can't say this is Russia or Putin's hand, but we also cannot remove him from this. And it may even be that probably this was done by other people to make Putin look bad. But then if this is the case, then that would mean that Russia is not as safe as it should be or as secure as it should be. because this happened inside Russia, Moscow.
Such an image also serves certain interests, I would say.
Yeah, so the point would be that if somebody of this caliber moved within Russia, where it's supposed to be safe and secure, and it is not done by Russia as a country or by Putin, then something is fundamentally wrong in Moscow, which would mean that even Putin himself is not safe, because Prigozhin is a person of interest right now in Russia. And the eyes of the Russian Federation should be on him, on his every move, everywhere he goes, everything he does. So if he's this person that Putin is interested in, the Russian Federation, all of the army and the security intelligence in Russia are interested in him, they are following him, they are monitoring him, and they are not the one who orchestrated this situation. Let's assume someone else did it. Then that brings forth another question that we don't have answers to. How safe is Putin himself, or how safe is Russia? And this is another perspective I'd like to inject.
It's a perspective. I think it's a huge leap, but it is a perspective and a perception. Yeah.
And Ukraine, again, is trying to facilitate that perspective because they listed a couple other names like you're next and we're coming after you next.
Well, they didn't say we're coming up to you, but you might be next, because the big man for one of the strongest units is Ramzan Kadyrov, the leader of the Chechens, the Akhmat battalion, and the other one they listed, I think, was maybe, no, I forgot if it was
Shoigu, maybe?
Yeah.
It might have been Shoigu.
Yeah, not sure.
Hamzat, that was
Lukashenko, obvious, because that's
both
where
scenario, both scenario does not make Putin look good.
Right.
If both scenario doesn't make him look good. The first scenario paints him as a killer that could harm anyone, which makes him look weak. And the second scenario paints him as someone who could not even secure his territory of somebody of this caliber, which also makes him look weak. And I know this will be a good news for Ukraine, because they have, been alleging that, Prigozhin was responsible for several deaths in Ukraine and Wagner and this and that. And then, this is just, I just don't know where to place this at this moment. I think we don't have enough information to give,
that's true,
an opinion. So I think I would rather wait and observe the situation more before trying to place the information together.
Yeah, the rest would be speculation, but I can tell you the evolution of the titles he had. He was Putin's, basically sidekick, his chef, his informant, his little inside man. Then he became a freedom fighter when the July events took place, the longest night in Russia. And then he came basically a traitor who lives in Belarus. And now he's described as the dissident Russian who got killed in an airplane. So the West is very much flipping the script around about who this guy actually is and his importance. I understand your two pictures, but here's what I don't see. Russia, because it wasn't in their interest, because the BRICS is going on, they would never want to show either instability or ruthlessness. I mean, it was the Ukraine and the Western European sources that put up that clip about him forgiving anything but not betrayal, because it's exactly, I think, 2 months since the so-called coup that he led against Moscow. And it's important to add, I don't know if you know, I got this picture up. The last time anybody's seen Prigozhin was somewhere in Africa. He didn't name the country, but he did an address that is 50 degrees Celsius. We're here to work. Then he flew back, and he was flying from St. Petersburg to Moscow. So it was there. Couldn't Putin get him, before the plane, at the airport, at any point, in a car, if he really wanted to disappear him without a trace? Why make a big explosion in the sky?
Yeah, this is a very good perspective. Actually, another thought I had about it, this seems more now to be like a conspiracy theory. But then another perspective I have is probably he is not in the crash. Probably he's not there.
We don't know. We don't know. If
so it may just be that, okay, they just needed him to go low and wanted to send a message that, okay, this guy that led the coup in Russia is gone, and then he is still alive carrying out many activities for the Russian Federation. Probably they had background settlement with Putin, and he can still continue to move, and then he'll become like this kind of figure that you can't really say if he's alive or if he's dead, but that makes him more powerful, because what we'll be left with at that time will be speculations, reports of dead or no dead. Russia is going to deny this as a country if they are not involved. And so I think we should just leave it for now. Let's see how
leave
the
it for now.
information.
I promise this is the last point on the Prigozhin affair, and we should talk about Africa next, by the way. But the people with a lot of time have followed the second private jet that wasn't shot down, that landed in Moscow when this one was shot down, on flight radar, open intelligence sources, and they already confirmed that it has left Moscow after this incident and is landed in Baku. So it's in Azerbaijan, basically. Who knows? Who knows? That is all we know. We cannot say.
Ben, I like your point about the timing. The timing of it definitely does not lend itself to make one think it was Russia or Putin or any Russian actor that is like a Russian nationalist, maybe that's detached from Putin somehow. But the timing is really bad because it takes away from BRICS. And it puts it takes the focus off of where Russia would like the focus to be, and in a negative way. It's definitely a negative reflection on Putin. No matter how you what narrative you're going to go with. Carlo, you want to jump in?
I really don't have anything to add. I know this is like going down the rabbit hole. The bodies have not even been identified yet, so we don't. Even if they identify Prigozhin as a victim or not, the conspiracy theories will continue.
Yeah, now, they're badly burned. One of them was beheaded, and Al Jazeera said that his phone was found, but the body has not yet been identified.
Yeah,
so we have
the
no
phone
idea.
was found. Yeah, but I happen to know. Yevgeny. Pick your towel off the floor. I told you. You can shower, but I don't know what's going on.
You can call him Eugene.
I've got this Russian guest here. His name is Yevgeny. That's where I'm at with it. To me, it's like it's at the joke level. I will say, you had Kursk. I haven't had an old friend who was a military expert, and I used to go, well, Rick, if you had a chance to take a vacation, where would you vacation? He'd go, Kursk, the site of the largest tank battle in the history of the world. He
knows at least.
So I mean, then you got that event, and then of course you've got the BRICS, which is a celebratory event, and so it seems like that there was enough propaganda value to throw a wrench into what all the good things that were happening around Russia, for outside people to be involved. And there's also the case that this guy Prigozhin killed 14 Russian military people.
You watched the Scott Ritter interview,
down
didn't
aircraft and helicopters. There may be some kind of personal vendetta involved. Beyond that, I don't really know anything.
Yeah, I think we should just talk about Africa.
I was going to say,
yes.
When we invited Hamzat, we had no idea these events would take place.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about Nigeria, Niger, and Africa. So maybe we should pass it on to you.
Let's talk about the pipeline.
Well,
do you want to lead us in, Hamzat?
Yeah, I have been really involved in shaping the narrative of Niger Republic since the coup took place. And my entry into the conversation, we did not really reacted immediately the coup took place. But when ECOWAS had its first meeting and elected or appointed President Bola Tinubu as the chairman of ECOWAS, he made a position in terms of the agenda that his leadership of ECOWAS is going to achieve. And that agenda is that under his leadership as ECOWAS chairman, the ECOWAS is going to ensure that the space of military coup truncating democracy will come to an end.
Ouch. That sounds like a campaign event. Yep.
So that is his mission upon appointment as chairman of ECOWAS. And it was just shortly, probably some weeks after he came on as chairman of ECOWAS and made this commitment that the coup in Niger Republic took place. So he was left with the option, okay, you thought as leader of ECOWAS that you're going to be discussing the other coups that have been happening before you came on board to become president of Nigeria and chairman of ECOWAS. But then suddenly, after you came on board, thinking you are going to be looking at those other issues, another coup now took place under your leadership. So he's left with it. So how do we address this situation? And from history or experience, it is known that when those other coups took place, the leadership of ECOWAS, or an African Union by extension, are always just issuing statements, calling for calm, wanting the coup plotters to return to constitutional order and all of that, which never works. And then they institute some few non-effective sanctions just to indicate that they are not in support of coup or military takeover. And all of that were never effective. So once this happened,
Sorry, by the other coups, you probably mean Mali, Burkina Faso,
in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and all the places. So now, because within the last 3 years, I think we have about 7 coups in Africa or in West Africa, 7 coups. So it has been a recurring activities over here. So now that this Niger Republic situation happened, Bola Tinubu, as the chairman, wanted to deviate from the ineffective approach that they have been using. Unfortunately, I think it was too harsh, too proactive in throwing the stone of forceful takeover of Niger Republic from the coup plotters if they fail to restore constitutional order. So he came forth and said that you have to relinquish power to the democratically elected government, or else we are going to force you out through whatever means possible, including military force. So that is like a departure from the normal ECOWAS approach. But he is coming from a perspective, this is my mission, and I want to ensure this. Now, once we had that from ECOWAS, I think it was towards the evening of that day, our organization, Peace Pro, which is the Foundation for Peace Professionals, reacted immediately and said, no, this is not the right approach. You cannot be throwing force as your first diplomatic reaction to a coup in another country. Firstly, this is purely an internal affair of the country. And secondly is, even if, because we are in the same community as West Africa, you ought to have exhausted other diplomatic means, other peaceful means of addressing it. And if those other peaceful means failed, then you can deploy other means. But this is what you're throwing to the front. And we pointed out all the other, implications of this approach. And then several other people in Nigeria and across the sub-region and across the world have been reacting in their own different ways. And so far, we have not had any positive, change. And just like we had thought in the reaction, when former head of state of Nigeria, General Abdulsalam Abubakar, and the Sultan of Sokoto, who is the head of the Muslims in Nigeria, were delegated to go to Niger Republic and have conversation with the military coup plotters. Firstly, they didn't honor them. They went in, but the leader did not see them.
He didn't see Victoria Nuland either.
He didn't. But then after that, another religious leader, who is the former CBN governor of Nigeria, Malam Sanusi Lamido, went, and he is the first major figure in Nigeria, in Africa that was honored in Niger, and he spoke to the coup leaders. He had conversation with them, and they honored him and passed their message across to him for onward transfer to the Nigerian president. And he also met with the Nigerian president that same day, and after which the same delegation that was sent before, led by former president of Nigeria, Abubakar Abdulsalam, and the Sultan of Sokoto, Malam Shehu, they all went back again for the second time. And this time around, they were received and they had conversation. And that was after the Nigeria had appointed a prime minister, who is the former director at the African Development Bank.
Yes.
I can't, yeah, they appointed him and they had conversation. And one of their claim is that one of the reasons why they didn't honor them the first time they came was because they are very angry that the Nigerian leadership or ECOWAS leadership did not reach out to them first and did not even attempt to address their issue from a diplomatic perspective. They threw in the military takeover or forceful, takeover as their first, and they were very angry at the time, and that was why they did not see Abdulsalam and Sultan of Sokoto when they came. So they seemingly apologized to the Nigerian leadership or the Sultan or the former president Abubakar Abdulsalam. They apologized to them, and it was at that they said they are now willing to honor the African Union delegation or other delegations that might be interested in mediating the situation. And that was how that happened. Then the following day, the African Union delegation and ECOWAS delegation as well, jointly, they met with them. But at that point, the proposal they were offering was to say, oh, they are going to relinquish power in 3 years' time. They needed 3 years to facilitate the return to democracy, meaning they are not willing to return power to the constituted government they truncated. And in fact, before the meeting took place, they actually issued a statement saying they wanted to prosecute the deposed president for some alleged crime that they think he has committed, which the ECOWAS reacted and said that is unacceptable. And it seems like they are playing around. The leadership of Nigeria Republic right now are not. I think they are trying to raise emotion because they feel that they have some kind of psychological support from mass of the people, because their perspective is not being promoted by them. It's just connected to the existing discontent between a lot of people in Africa and even outside Africa, those who feel that the continents have been overexploited by France and several other countries. So naturally, these people connected to this situation, and they are giving them free, promotion, even perspective that in my view, even perspective that the coup plotters might not necessarily think about, is being used to promote and preserve their position. And that made them feel like, oh, if we have mass support for what we are doing, even outside of our own country, then why should we be willing to just let go like that? This is not something they planned for, but then it is working in their favor. And I think that the ECOWAS mission will actually be committing a blunder, an historic blunder, if they went into Niger Republic militarily. I feel that would be a miscalculation of the mood of the world at this moment, the mood of the African people and the mood of the Nigerians themselves. Like, for example, now some of us who have been advocating against the use of force, we don't necessarily have any interest in the coup plotters. In fact, we share the same idea with ECOWAS, saying that there is need to return to constitutional order. But then we believe that if there is need to return to constitutional order, it doesn't have to be by force, because what force will mean that we will be creating situations that will be worse than what we are trying to correct. And again, I feel that ECOWAS and African Union as a body has not taken the responsibility they have very seriously. Because before this moment, many Francophone countries' citizens have been crying about the, abusive relationship they have with France. It is not just an ordinary abusive relationship, it's an endemically abused relationship
I agree.
that they have with France. And I believe that the continent as a whole, the African Union and the ECOWAS, were supposed to work with these people to ensure that they gain better ground against France, even if they cannot do it once and for all, like they are taking a hostile position against France. They could have been working with these countries to strengthen them against France, to get back some of their powers, if not all at the same time. But all of this has not been happening. So ECOWAS and African Union is just like an NGO that is just trying to, just become like a body without any direction. And even when they have a position, they cannot even articulate their position properly. They want to be in the good book of the West at the detriment of being on the good book of their own citizens. And over time, this has become something that is allowing non-state actors in Africa to gain momentum from among the citizens. Because now the position of the government, most of the government, is not aligning with the position, that the direction that the citizens want the government to go. Although we understand that some of these governments have limitations, they have restrictions, they don't have the power that some of us think they have, and they have limited security to guarantee their own safety against the almighty power that the West can wield against them. But then this is what they are supposed to build for their government over time. They are supposed to build people's psychology so that the more public support they have for certain conversations, certain positions, the better it will be for even the foreign bodies to be able to compel them to do certain things, especially when they see that will be counterproductive to their sustaining power in the region. But many of these bodies, ECOWAS, African Union, they have not taken this issue as their own issue to resolve. They are leaving the countries involved to themselves. And that's explained why many of the leaders of those countries felt helpless about the situation. And they feel like, oh, we just have to continue to kowtow towards the West, else we are going to be victim, and our people may not be in the position to protect us against this situation. So this is the situation. But then ECOWAS now wanting to assert a force against the coup plotters, something that almost, I don't know of anyone in Nigeria that is in support of this. I don't know of anyone in Africa that is in support of this. I follow through the development properly.
It would spread
I don't see
to a pan-African conflict. Yeah.
I mean,
I see it as a situation where if they go into Niger Republic militarily, I don't know the consequence of this. Of course, they may succeed in removing the military junta by force, but they will not win. That would just be a tactical loss.
Hamzat, may I remind you?
And they just have Bazoum. They have Bazoum. Democracy is just a word. And if there's nothing behind it, and I've listened to people all over Africa, from the man on the street to leaders, Ramaphosa, the president, the current Kenyan president, the Ugandan president. Democracy is just a word if you're not delivering anything. And Francophile Africa, and France in particular, and the United States and Europe have had decades to deliver, and they haven't. Yes. So democracy means nothing at this point.
I agree with you to some extent. Let me just say this. I agree to some extent. But here is the point. In Niger Republic alone, they have had at least 5 military leadership in Niger Republic. And they have also achieved nothing other than, destruction. As a matter of fact, they take the countries back worse than how they met it. Even in Nigeria here, the first coup in Nigeria is 1966, right? And all of the complaints that the military leadership came in to claim that they want to solve, by the time they were leaving in 1979, it was worse. and then they took over again. And then by the time they were leaving in 1999, it was far worse. So the situation is,
yes,
all right, I'm with you.
it's different though, because they can look to Senegal, they can look to Mali, they can look to Burkina Faso, and there is progress being made. And not only do you have that, but you have the security issue to go back to Wagner, which can supply security. And the big picture is China as an alternative bulwark for development and lending toward development. So an alternative to IMF, to the IMF and the West being, and their draconian lending policies and their structural adjustment loans, which are there to suppress people and steal assets. They now have good examples. Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Mali are.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
What's that?
Okay, he'll be back. He had to drop off.
He's going to be right back.
Yeah,
So, Carlo, that's a good point.
I wanted to head on to the big picture, but before we went there, I wanted to hang on to the democracy aspect of it, because Hamzat used the word appointed twice to describe Tinubu. You know, that's not democratically elected. And I'd like to remind the viewer, if someone's out there, that the same kinds of elections that were held in the 4 oblasts in the Donbass and the one in Crimea, that everybody said is illegal because under the force of a weapon. I mean, that's what restoring democracy would look like in Niger. I wanted to make that little point. But yeah, everything is about the big picture. And I'm sure you want to get onto the gas pipeline and BRICS. It has to do with BRICS as well.
I wanted to make a few points. I was going to ask Hamzat if he saw any kind of, international motivation behind the Niger coup, or if he thought it was just a purely internal thing, which the international community then had to deal with. But I'm curious if he thinks there's any hand behind it, whether U.S., whether Russia, whether China. But also, I was going to make the same point that you guys did. Why this demand and this big push to return to the constitutional order that hasn't done anything for them. So why is that a big thing that everybody's in agreement we need to return to? I think that
agreements have been made.
Oh,
I know. What I think. Go ahead, Carlo.
I know. Look, the Riviera is littered with Ukrainian billionaires. They call it the Monaco Battalion.
They do.
They've stolen billions of dollars. There are people in the in the Sahel region of Africa that want that. That's what that would militate. Tinubu, let's talk about him. That's why Tinubu wants to get involved. He can enrich himself even further than he already is. You've seen him dance with Macron. This guy is a pure whore. He's been a whore to the United States since he was a student at the university. He wasn't at the University of Chicago. He was at a business school in Chicago, and he was caught money laundering. He was caught by the IRS money laundering. This guy was turned into an asset. You want to talk about, Russiagate being a bunch of shit? It was. But this thing on Tinubu is not a bunch of shit. They caught him red-handed. The IRS caught him red-handed. And believe me, the U.S. intelligence saw this guy as somebody they can manipulate. Plus, the guy is just a greedy bastard. And there's a lot of greedy bastards in Africa who like to talk about constitutional government while they steal from their own people.
Yeah. Carlo, I agree, but the why they want him back is I think there's inks on a page. I think he signed a lot of agreements that they want enforced that the new government does not. This is speculation.
Well, the pipeline. See, I've come across
That's how we were going to go to the
people
pipeline.
that say that the Nigerian coup people have canceled the pipeline deal. Now, I want to ask, is he coming back? I hope he comes back.
He said he's coming back.
Okay.
So we can move on to some analysis of the BRICS. They've got 5 men and a dress. Okay, that's unprofessional.
But this was the other thing. This was this morning breaking news. I don't know why. The bed just tossed me out at about 6 a.m. And a couple of hours later, I saw Modi live, who everybody was expecting. He's holding expansion back. We don't want expansion. He was proud to welcome the new members, which to me was amazing, on the same day that the I forgot now, the Indian lunar lander landed on the south pole of the moon. Congratulations, India! It is a historic moment. And BRICS has expanded. I wanted to get into BRICS, but I mean, it's unfair that Hamzat can't respond. But he made this point. He's this, let's make a slow transition instead of anything sudden. But, he said people in the Niger Republic, one military coup after other, didn't make things better. I think the French military base and the largest US drone base has to do with that a little bit too, that terrorism is still a thing they have to deal with. It's just unfair that he's not here for this. But this summit, I mean, it was enormous. We can get into all the statements that were made beforehand at the end, but basically it's incorporated OPEC, guys. Basically, 6 of the top 8 oil producers in the world are going to be in BRICS from January 1, 2024. This changes it's an earthquake geopolitically. It sends the G7 to just, sorry, you're irrelevant. And it does the same to the petrodollar. It's in the ICU, according to Pepe Escobar, and that's a very good analogy there. So I think this was the historic event they'll talk about. Carlo, you already have something.
Yeah, I just want to go back a little bit. I mean, I want to talk about Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. They didn't. Castro didn't come into power via a coup. He just drove out the Batista forces and that sort of thing. And same with the Sandinistas and so on. But there's a difference between the Sandinistas and Castro and the Castro Cubans and the kind of people that are running a lot of the coups around the world. There's 2 kinds of people. There are people that run coups and then they just fuck everybody over in their country and give everything to the West anyway. But then there are different kinds of people. They're the current leadership in Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Mali are a different breed of coups.
They're Gaddafi.
Yeah, Gaddafi, and he's the prime example. And they saw what the U.S. did to him. He makes an agreement with them to share intelligence, and they kill him. So they bomb his country back into the Stone Age, as Colonel LeMay said about Vietnam. But so there's different people. You got to make a distinction between these coups, and not hard to make. You can just see what they do later on. How many yachts they own, how many palaces they buy around the world, how many corrupt European officials like Macron they dance with, and go, oh, what an old friendship, and all that. You can suss them out. It's not hard, the people of Senegal and Mali, especially Mali, Guaidó is doing apparently a great job. They're thrilled with this new situation. Thrilled.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to democratic, you've heard Tinubu being appointed twice, whereas these new coup plotters, apparently, they have really understated massive popular support, lots and lots of flags. Apparently, they raised 100,000 volunteers to defend the country. People are signing up. Where do I go?
Not to mention, if fuck elections, just fuck them. And fuck this word democracy. If you've got somebody like Castro in power or Ortega in power that are really helping their people, or Maduro and Chavez are really helping their people, let them stay there, because it's impossible to practice democracy with the United States standing on everybody's neck. And
I agree.
But that's a real important
influencing
point.
Everything. If you've got that kind of poison in the well, you don't drink the water. You don't go, oh, that's a democratic well. Go drink it and die. Because that's what will happen to you. You'll get a Bolsonaro after car wash, which happened with Lula. It's like fuck democracy. If these people are doing a good job, I mean, the kid in Burkina Faso is 34 years old. 40% of his country is controlled by Boko Haram, and he's still making progress in various areas. Poverty, literacy. Give me a break. Let him stay. He's 34. Let him stay 50 years if he's going to do good things for his people. Jesus Christ.
A rant I completely embrace. Billy Bob, you're next. I know you already have something, but I wanted to say quick response to this that you mentioned, like Castro's Cuba or Gaddafi's Libya, or I can mention China. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because one could argue they are far more democratic than what is Western democracy, those kinds of stuff that you have in the US, which is a clown show, because what they have is full process democracy, year-round decision-making by decision-making bodies. It's not you vote once every 3 or 4 years. I just wanted to add that, but Billy Bob had a spark. I saw it.
Well, I mean, it's just such an important point. How the word democracy has been exploited and misused, and that people's conception of it in the West is totally detached from any kind of actual, real sense of democracy. So democracy is, not just government by the people, governing by the people, but it's putting the interests of the vast majority first. I mean, that's what democracy is. And in the West, they say it's democracy, but they put the interests of the elite wealthy minority first. And the elite wealthy minority hates actual democracy, and they're not going to allow any democracy to exist in Africa unless it also puts, first and foremost, prioritize the interests of the West over the interests of Africa itself. But on that point, what is the interest of Africa? It's about development, right? And this is what is real. This is the democratic approach for Africa is development and raising living standards, increasing quality of life, bringing technology, roads, ports, schools, hospitals, etc. But on that note, there is Z. I was going to read Z's words at the BRICS summit, right? So who is developing fast becomes a target of containment. Who catches up becomes a target of obstruction. So the West targets those countries.
Read the next one. It's my favorite.
Are quickly developing. So Z says, this is futile, as I have seen more than once that blowing out others' lamp will not bring light to oneself.
Who else speaks like that in the world? Who else?
No, and it's exactly right. And that's exactly what needs to be said. And that's really the approach everybody, the perception everybody should have, the perspective everybody should have with regards to Africa, the BRICS, and this new Cold War against China, right? It's not going to make things better. It's not going to benefit the West any to contain China and obstruct China. That's just going to cause pain all around. BRICS nations do not barter away principles, succumb to external pressure, or act as vassals of others. Well, that's not true if the U.S. has anything to say about it. And development is an inalienable right of all countries, not a privilege reserved for the few. But again, that hasn't been the approach since 1945. Since 1945, the U.S. has designated particular countries as being producer countries, and the rest of the world, the developed West, is the consumer country. So we target those people. You're not going to be a consumer. You're going to be a producer. You're going to produce for our consumption. And that's been basically.
I'd add to that, you're just the raw minerals. We're going to process them as well. We're going to make the most of the.
You're not going to benefit from this relationship. You do not benefit from this relationship. 100% of the benefit of this relationship goes to the West. And so Africa needs to realize that, if that's democracy, you need to move on. Again, the West hates democracy. FDR won 4 elections, and the capitalists they hated him.
They had to make a rule.
And they might have murdered him. And if they didn't murder him, they had to make a rule that he could not win a 5th election. Because guess what? When you do things in the interest of the vast majority instead of the interest of the wealthy minority, people appreciate it and they'll keep voting you in. And that's why the U.S. is so good at exploiting this term democracy and rigging democratic elections and maintaining a constitutional order, which is shit. It's literal shit. And it's not gonna, it's anti-democratic. All right. Where is Hamzat? He's not back yet.
Well, if he's not back, can I quiz you a little bit? Because something I found surprising, and I wonder if you can guess the country that's the odd one out, or why, or who's interested in. I think it could be interesting because the official expansion is Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Argentina.
Iran.
Argentina and Iran. I'm
Argentina,
sorry, Iran
yeah.
is very important as well. So What do you think? Which one's the odd one out and why?
Venezuela.
You were
They were going
expecting
for the
Venezuela.
oil. Venezuela has the first or second largest oil reserves in the world.
So you were
Yeah, I'm
expecting Venezuela.
surprised.
I was expecting Indonesia, and it didn't.
That was high on the list too.
I wish there was some transparency and they had like an essay paper about who was included in why and who wasn't included in why. But I mean, it's
they're
all
not
just
going to share that with us, not yet. But
Jeez.
I have some hunches. If you would bring on the screen something I'm sharing right now, Vladimir Putin's speech, to grand applause, even though it was televised, was he had two major massive functions, and one of this is the International North-South Trading Corridor, and the other was the Northern Sea Trade Route, which also connects the Global South to Russia through a shorter route. And just look at this map, the new additions. This is Iran, okay? This is Saudi Arabia. This here is Egypt, also a member, and this here, I think, is Ethiopia. In between them is Sudan, where the Russian-based fiasco was. You know what's here? This is Eritrea, the last country in Africa that still recognizes Taiwan, okay? The one that wasn't invited. All of Africa was invited except for this little nation. And right here is Djibouti, the one Chinese base. Basically, look at this enormous unusual spending of resources to get something to India, and look at this, and this pretty much means Turkey right here, irrelevant. Europe, irrelevant. What he also talked about was basically recalibrating our resource flows, our logistics flows to people who need it and reliable partners in the south. This is why to me it was groundbreaking. We could talk about Europe is dead, Germany's having a bad time. But this is the first time I think I've seen the grand design of how this will actually work. We don't trust your people. We're not with you. We can halve our expenditure. We can get it to people who need it and actually win-win, both develop. I thought this map was the most important thing.
So it demonstrates a closeness between Russia and India, which is good. And also it shows that, they're trying to take away the leverage of people like Turkey, Erdogan, who are not reliable partners, essentially.
Let's say that's where we're speculating, but there's been signals. Erdogan recently reaffirmed that Crimea, he doesn't recognize the annexation of Crimea by Russia. He recognizes the, territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is a big no-no, after he let the Azov guys go. So he's put some bad sticks on the fire, I'd say. And diplomatically, in this last week, we had lots of communications and headlines about, this gas hub idea. I think we could have it in Iran. The gas hub idea for the last half a year was supposed to be in Turkey. So these are very big things. I mean, the other news, which was one of the pieces in Africa, which I found very interesting, and it comes from Reuters, was a Russian military delegation, not Shoigu, but one of the, deputy ministers of defense, landed in Libya. And this is weeks after Libya suspended the energy deal with Turkey. Not weeks, sorry, that was in January. I mean, Libya is also one of those northern African states. So I think these moves are exceedingly interesting and will be in the history books, studied for a long, long time.
Why Argentina?
Here's the thing. That's what I didn't get. And I don't know what sort of game is being played, because after that, today, I read an op-ed in RT saying that's going to be the biggest challenge, because last Thursday, before the BRICS summit actually started, I read the headline, you probably remember, the Argentine president, Spanish name that I don't have on the top of my head, already said that that's not on the horizon. We just got IMF loans and American loans, and BRICS membership is not on the horizon.
I think
those were his words, quoted. Yeah. And then he's one of the leaders of the new members that didn't show up. Ibrahim Raisi was there from Iran. The Egyptian El-Sisi was there, but this guy wasn't there. Only his foreign minister to accept the new membership. So that was the weirdest thing, because there's an upcoming election that could decide a lot. So I expect a lot of meddling there. I think
it doesn't have a lot of natural resources.
No.
That it's $44 billion in debt to the IMF.
Yeah, speculation. That was Brazil's vote. Saying, who do you want? Brazil wants that.
Structural adjustments, so that 40% of the population is living in poverty.
Yeah, it's incredibly indebted. Yeah.
And it's about to go fascist by a little Trump guy.
The hair guy, yeah.
Who's really, he's literally anti-Semitic, openly anti-Semitic on a number of occasions.
And his Pinochet style anti-commie, anti-lefty, like basically we should kill them. He's that style of guy.
And yet Lula was big supporter of Argentina being included. I'm
Yeah, Latin
don't
America
get it.
there's oddities there that I don't get either. Latin America is weird.
No, so not anything, Billy Bob.
Well, I mean, I was going to say the macro analysis is, this is real history is being made. You're seeing a decline, the decline of Western imperialist hegemony with the increase of these kinds of partnerships, organizations, BRICS. I mean, it's really, taking away from U.S. dollar hegemony, and it's a threat. It's a threat to we're seeing playing out, what the decline of Western imperialism. And I mean, I can't say it any more succinctly than that, but it's great to see, but that's the takeaway. And I mean, the U.S. is having to deal with it, and we're going to see exactly what their response is going to be to all these things, but it's not going their way.
I agree. Other than that, can I add there's other takeaways? One of them is most of the energy under the control of OPEC is now under the control of BRICS, if we can put it that way. Yeah. That is a huge game
that's
changer
very fascinating, right? Saudi Arabia, Iran. I don't know why Venezuela was there. I had the same thought as Carlo. I'm not sure why Venezuela isn't included. Maybe they'll be 2025.
Yeah.
But man, they got all the oil producers now, all the energy producers, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia. I'm you made a good point about Indonesia. That's a little surprising as well.
Yeah, everybody was expecting it. Indonesia was on the fast track. Indonesia was the last G20 presidency, very, very BRICS friendly, the way they organized it.
There's it's sheer speculation trying to figure this out. Why some and why not others?
That's just point number one. But we could do some other based on the other points that came afterwards, because Dilma Rousseff, the new development bank, the BRICS bank, said that 30% of the loans, so this is already a decision made and announced, will be announced in local currencies. So they're not doing, we're going to do this shared gold back, whatever, but we're already moving away. There's that alternative. So this is still the dollar and energy. But the second thing, which I found fascinating, that they already announced that there's going to be upcoming summit. There's going to be BRICS 11 summit in Kazan in October, which is exactly the same time when Russia takes over the BRICS presidency. There's going to be a BRICS Plus summit in early November in St. Petersburg, Petrograd, Leningrad, whatever you like. 7,000 participants already confirmed from 57 countries. And then there's also this, they're going to work on an alternative paying system. And then there's BRICS Games, there's World Youth Festivals, basically an alternative Olympics, an alternative UN. There's this declaration that they signed at the very end of it, the Johannesburg Declaration. And it is, we need to be much more, the global south or the poorer countries need to be much more represented in multilateral institutions and all that, including the UN Security Council. That is signed, and that is our statement. All of us here in BRICS and all of the observers.
We're creating international institutions to bypass the existing rules-based order, which is
not just the financial, but the political, the decision-making stuff.
Athletics. It's great.
Athletics as well, because Russia's been fucked up and Belarus has been just out of the Olympics. And I think
with the doping scandal, what a bunch of shit that is. I mean, that's just like all the other hoaxes. That's just
doping scandal was years ago. Right now, it's because of Ukraine, isn't it?
Well, true, but that's the just the narrative that won't die. I mean, anytime you think of Russian athletes, they're all on steroids, like even Ivan Drago from Rocky. Anyway,
wait, two more headlines that I enjoyed the most. One came out from Reuters where Macron's France accused Russia of predatory influence in Africa, which I found hilarious. I thought that was the best thing I've read this week, and so far it has been. And RT did this, I think this is the highest level of Russian trolling, saying BRICS should set up, quote, a kiddie table for Western leaders like Macron. And they cited how their diplomats have been treated in the EU and the UN, with people standing up and leaving the room. We should set up a kiddie table. You can't do stuff, but you can sit there and play along with your little toys.
Who quoted that?
Sorry?
That's a quote from who?
That is the title of an RT headline.
Okay, that was an RT article.
OPED. It's RT's.
Yeah.
Those are my two favorites this week.
So it's great to see, and thank you, Ben. I mean, you articulated way better the geopolitical shifts that are taking place. It's tough to do justice to exactly what's going on with mere words, and I struggle with it. But there's a lot of other things. BRICS is super important. Prigozhin, big story. Everybody was discussing. But there's all kinds of things on the domestic front. So you had the Republican presidential debates, which were a big flop. And then you had the most widely viewed, I think by more than a factor of almost 3 when I last checked. So they beat out Oprah interviewing Michael Jackson, 61 million people. I think it's by a factor of 3. The Twitter interview, it's not called Twitter anymore, whatever it is.
Tucker on X.
Tucker Carlson on X interviewing Donald Trump on the night of the Republican, debates, got almost triple the views of the highest, most viewed interview in the history of the known universe.
Can we say it? Last time I checked was 150 million views. Can we say that network television is dead? At least, whatever your takes on anybody.
I'd like to. I mean, yeah, these platforms of mass propaganda hopefully are losing their influence and their potency. I hope, but. That's not to say that, Tucker doesn't engage in a bunch of propaganda himself and Trump doesn't engage in a bunch of propaganda themselves. It's not like, they're ideologically pure and
we just look for ideological purity. Sorry.
Exactly. But it's definitely noteworthy to see the popularity of Donald Trump, and I think he represents a threat to what the establishment has planned, as a response to all these world events. So I think we had on our Tuesday program, we had on Canthan, and he was he suggested that by 2028 they're gonna initiate a conventional war against China, and they're going to try and tank the global economy because they're all out of options, and that Trump represents a threat to that strategy, and that he would not go for that strategy. He would not implement that strategy, and so they've got to make sure that he is not in any sort of power that can throw a wrench in their imperialist gears. But Carlo, that's a controversial.
Well, I don't want to be controversial because for me it's all theater, but so that would mean Trump. What Trump is saying, anti-China wise now, he doesn't really mean. That's I had my stupid theory about Trump and his. I think he's a guy that if he's like carving the Thanksgiving turkey, which he probably doesn't, with his solid gold knife, and after just taking a dump in his solid gold toilet, and he cuts his finger a little bit, he faints. I just think he's one of those guys, and that's what what's made him reluctant to follow John Bolton when Bolton marched into his office, at 9:30 every morning, while Trump was having his 5th Diet Cola, and said, "We've got to go to war with Venezuela. They got oil." And he'd go, "They've got," and Trump goes, "They've got oil? Well, goddamn, we got to get that oil." It's like, I think it's at that level, and I don't know how you really credit that, and I don't know how you really deal with that. Trump claims, and has claimed for a long time, that he's been more anti-China than anybody because he's more anti-some.
It's a popular political position to take.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's the position. Yeah, that's Trump. Take the popular political position. So if he comes into power, and he just scotches the notion of going to war with Taiwan, for whatever reason, it's like it would interrupt his day, or he wants to fondle some pussy or something.
Well,
then if that's on his mind and that stops the war, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
If we could march, attractive women into his office to distract him constantly, and it kept world peace, I'm all for that. Find the attractive women, Give them a good deal. Give them a lot of money to parade themselves in office. See what I can't. He already did that. You know, all these fuckers with money populate there. They got all these attractive women around them. Do that. You know, negate all this hostility or whatever they, you know, money grubbing or whatever, you know, with whatever you can divert them with. But I think it's really at a very a very primitive level when Trump is operating.
I can definitely. Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
I would say I'd like to clear my name after the little fracas we had last time. I'm not a MAGA person. I don't love Trump. He is a primitive person, a very simple game show host. But I am at the level from the outside looking out. I'm the ABB, the anyone but Biden. Because, I mean, just this week, just look at this asshole. He introduced the latest sanctions this time on the summer Arctic camp for some reason, a summer children's camp in Russia. I don't know what. After he slept through the dinner with the people of Hawaii, where 1,000 people are missing and the media is as silent about it as they are of BRICS. I mean, I used to wake up in the morning to laugh at whatever this fucker is saying on television, you know, doing little cheerleaders girls and weird stuff. And now I'm just terrified for the world every morning, and I'm not going to miss that, you know.
Well, yeah, you're right. And Trump and Biden is obviously on the record as a warmonger. I mean, all my life, he's been a senator who was essentially a warmonger. You know,
absolutely. Since his earliest days.
I mean, he's a prick. You know, he's a piece of shit, really, if you want to get down to it. But I forgot what my other point was. Oh, right. But I was thinking about the hurricane, or whatever it was.
Hurricane Hillary. That's
California on Maui. I mean, on Hawaii. And I was also thinking about Puerto Rico. So what did Trump do? He went down and he free threw paper towels to the audience.
Yes.
And then he sold the energy production to a private corporation that provides 3 or 4 hours a day of electricity to people in Puerto Rico, which is an American protectorate. It's as close as a state as you can get.
Except you can't vote.
Neither of these guys give a rat's rectum about human beings. That's true. You got to bear that in mind.
Yes.
So when you got to clean out the Augean stables, you call up Heracles and you go, get it all out. Then you can marry my daughter. You know, otherwise we don't want to hear from you.
It's the uniparty, as many people call it.
Trump is as much a part of the scum mobile that runs the United States as Biden is. The problem with Biden is hundreds of thousands of people, as we speak, have lost their lives when there is a vague chance that Trump may have not gone that route. And he's claiming he wouldn't have gone that route, but he hasn't offered any kind of solidarity.
Yeah. So
since you brought Mustache Man John Bolton into this, he was surrounded by some really shit.
And
shit.
it's his own fault for surrounding himself. But I mean, you know, he learned. He gets a mulligan, I guess. But what he would do as a politician, you know, he would leverage existing propaganda narratives, and then he would promote himself on top of them. So, for instance, he would leverage the fact that the West is constantly scaring people about the Korean Peninsula and the evil North Koreans could blow us up. And so he leveraged that to benefit himself by meeting with him, saying, "Look, you guys don't have to worry about this. I've solved it." And he would do the same thing with China. He would say, "Hey, instead of war, let me have a summit with Xi." And guess what he would do? He would come to a deal. He would strike a deal with Xi, and he would promote himself as the best deal maker ever. Here's Hamzat, and it would be self promotioning, but he wouldn't go war because he doesn't want war. He wants a deal. He wants a win-win deal. And guess what? That's because he lacks a class consciousness like the rest of the capitalists.
I have to add this every time. Despite the lack of class consciousness, he almost made peace in Korea. He would have if it wasn't undermined. Welcome back, Hamza.
Sorry, I was just in the middle of something, so I had to go at that time.
All good. We kind of shifted to US and kind of Asia.
I want to agree with Ben on that last point.
Yeah.
Because
what's happening in
Koreans
US?
want it. The Koreans want to reunite.
They do.
They do.
Yeah. And that's not going so well. The Economist, the billionaires magazine in London, is mocking Australia because it's become this arms depot for the US. The Economist. Did you ever see that coming? Also, good advice from the Wall Street Journal. This is what you guys have to look forward to. I'm just going to read it verbatim. To save money, maybe you should skip breakfast. Yeah. That's an actual headline.
I mean, it's actually good advice with our obesity epidemic. But
yeah,
so Hamzat, we were wanting to ask you some questions when you had to leave. You are on mute, but so let's see. My question was, did you think, with the Republic of Niger, the coup that went on there, do you think that was an internal coup, or do you think there was, international motivations that were supporting and promoting and trying to facilitate it? And were those motivations, were they pro-US, were they pro-Russia, pro-China, or was it strictly like an internal thing? And then the other question I was wondering is, you spoke about the return to the constitutional order, as if the constitutional order had achieved anything for anyone in Africa. And so I was just curious why we are promoting this, why we're prioritizing this return to a constitutional order instead of prioritizing the rapid development of the continent. Because I'm not sure you can have both.
Yeah, I can actually. And there are subjects I have discussed a little somewhere earlier. And as a matter of fact, I had a piece that I had written about it. And firstly is about the international dimension to the Niger coup. What happened is that we cannot say that it is an international conspiracy. We have to admit that it has some local elements in it. Every coup always do.
Yeah.
But then we cannot rule out the international connection. And from my own view, which I had discussed earlier with someone, is that the coup in Africa, not just Niger Republic, the one in Mali, the one in Burkina Faso, and this one, they have something in common. While the first thing they have in common is that they want to eject France from their affairs.
Hamzat, for a second, can I add details you might not know? Because we've been covering this, and French diplomats in Le Figaro magazine have been very unhappy with the US. They've been very unhappy with Victoria Nuland's visit because it seems to sort of legitimize the coup government. And they said, with allies like these, who needs enemies? They were very pissed, the French were, at the US.
No,
do you think there's something, some sort of competition between the two?
Yeah, I was actually getting to that. I think maybe I will send you the piece I wrote on this global conspiracy in the Niger Republic. And the point is, almost all of this coup has something in common, which is that they want to eject France from their countries. That's number one. And number two is that another thing they have in common is that most of the coup plotters were actually US trained officers.
Yeah. It's very
so
interesting.
On one hand, they want to eject France from their countries. On the other hand, they are US trained officers. But then another thing is all of them were backed and supported by Russia.
That's rare when Russia and the US are on the same page. And there's a pipeline to consider. You can maybe tell us about
this
that.
tripartite situation against France, trained by US, supported by Russia, seems not to be understood by many people. Some people feel like, why can you be saying US trained officers are backed by Russia? Is US not against Russia? Is Russia not against US? And all of this situation. Now, this is one part. Another part is we're looking at it from the Ukrainian situation, right? France is the only country in Europe that seems to be bold enough to question the direction US is leading NATO, especially on the Russia situation.
Yet they still send weapons, but yes, you're right.
And because of that, France actually went to China to try to explore alternative pathway for Europe But then many of the European countries are not bold enough to follow in the pathway of France, even though many of them share in their perspective. So, and then I connected and said, that, okay, could it be that these US trained officers, even though US is saying it is not supporting the coup, could they actually be supporting the coup because it indirectly affects France's interests, even though they are also supported by China? So like it is a way that you have to look at all of this. And then there is one fact in all of the coup. They are mostly supported by Russia. It's either in Mali or Burkina Faso or in Niger. They are all supported by Russia. So this should answer your question on whether it is a local affair or it has an international dimension.
But you have to take into consideration the kind of training you get at Fort Lejeune in Georgia, the School of the Americas. It's got a new name. I haven't, the kind of training you get there is military. It doesn't have anything to do with development. And and a lot of people who have been to through that training, they come back with a repressive mindset. This is how you repress the local population. This is how you firm up your borders. This is how you engage in low intensity conflict. But it has nothing to do with development. So
I get that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Now, I wanted to answer the second leg of the question about the purpose of democracy and development in Niger Republic, because I was talking about return to constitutional order as well. So I wanted to respond to that and say, now, the reason why at this moment in Africa, we have experienced a number of coups. And as a matter of fact, using Nigeria as a case study, one of the reasons why Nigeria could not fully utilize its potential since independence is the introduction of coup. And up till today in Nigeria, we still refer to the pre-coup era in Nigeria in 1966 as the golden era of Nigeria. This is after more than 30 years of military leadership, one after the other. But the period that the coup plotters in 1966 describe as barbaric, as weak, as non-developmental, those are still the era we see more development than now. And this comes down to the point that the coup plotters might have good intention. I don't have doubt about that. Because as an activist myself, I have spent most of my teenage years in the civil society. And I have learned a couple of things that almost everyone in the civil society or even in the military, we often have one thing in common, is this undying passion that we wanted things to be better and we think we can get it done than other people. But as we grow older and as I learn better myself, I kind of understood that our passion is not enough to bring about development, just our passion. Our passion must be backed by adequate knowledge of the system, understanding of what we are up against, and the ability to transform the situation to our own advantage. Unfortunately, most of the passionate people who are into activism or in military or even in some of the coups that have happened, I cannot deny their passion for wanting development. But one thing is obvious. They lack understanding of the enormity of the challenges before us. They don't understand the dynamics of the situation, and they lack capability to really transform the situation. The only thing they have is their passion and wanting to say, we don't want it to be like this. We don't want it to be like this. We want a better thing. But so how do you get that done? Do you really know the problem? And that is missing in many. And that's why many of the previous coups fail to achieve the basic thing they claim they want to address, but instead aggravated the situation. So for people like us who have been in the civil society, who have paid attention to the coups, we feel like, okay, yes, you are people. In fact, one of the reasons why the coup plotters in Africa often enjoy initial support, not support, initial excitement, is by almost every time there is a coup, there is always that initial excitement from the people. Because
Look,
yes, we want something better.
It's a
But
perspective.
then, yeah, it's my perspective. I'm speaking from my perspective.
Well, I
Hamzat,
have to
but
say,
I wanted to say that,
I don't agree with that at all. Let me just
yeah,
say
I have
one
to push
thing.
back too.
I mean, are you telling me that the transition from the murder of Lumumba to the years of repression under Mobutu were were somehow cheered on by the Congolese people?
Or that
No, you
Mali,
didn't,
Guinea,
you didn't
Burkina Faso
understand.
don't have tangible results, because that's not true either.
No.
That's right. That's a good point.
I think you don't get what I'm saying. Let me put it this way. You know, when a coup took place in a country, there is that initial excitement,
Yes.
right? Anytime. But then after a while, you see that initial excitement died down. And then even the military governments starts to become repressive on its own, because it is no longer enjoying the support, because what people thought they wanted to see when the coup took over is not what they see. And what
Except
is
if,
left is narrative.
there are tangible results in the forms of loans, of
Yes.
infrastructure
Now,
construction, of schools, of hospitals.
Yes.
no. Look at it from this. That there is
Yeah.
no government in Africa or anywhere that will not have construction or this and that. No matter how bad that government is, there is that element of doing. But the question is it enough? What are the indices? What are the development indices are we using to measure this development? Do we have tangible facts and say that, okay, this is development? Because, for example, look at it here in Nigeria, in Kwara here that I am. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, I don't know of other countries, we wanted to assess the performance of our lawmakers, which is not something that there is a template for. We don't really have template of assessing lawmakers over here. So lawmakers are an island of their own. They can't be assessed. They just go and go. So it's left with your opinion versus mine, right? Now, we wanted to assess them from a data perspective. So our organization developed what we call the Legislative Watch. So the Legislative Watch becomes the first data-based assessment modality to check whether or not truly a lawmaker is performing or not, with tangible evidence to show, in which even the lawmaker, if we are able, based on the standard we develop to assess them, the lawmaker cannot argue with us if we say you are not performing well. He cannot argue because we are going to show you the data that says you are not, despite being a lawmaker and not from the executive arm of government. And because we were able to do this, we were able to assess in this last 4 years, we have the Legislative Watch 1, 2, 3 every year. And in Kwara State, where I am right now, all of the lawmakers, from the first year that we assessed them, more than 90% of them score below average.
Well,
And the
scoring is
second
set
year,
up.
You see,
Look.
I'm in America. We have dozens of those watchdog groups, and they go from kind of funded publicly and they're basically honest, all the way to the fact that the Central Intelligence Agency is behind them, and of course they're just basically the same quality as NGOs. That for you guys to do that is fine, but you got to show some tangible results. To go back to the notion of development, there's a huge change that has taken place, and that huge change is in the form of China, and China's ability and willingness to create development programs. And one of the things that China it does not get involved in is politicians who have self-interest in heart. You can talk all you want about how the Chinese lets the government on the ground operate the way it's operating on the ground, but still, when it comes down to it, it's a lending procedure, a development procedure, and they're not going to give money to people that steal it, that just steal it, and that's maybe endemic to Africa. There's a lot of it. It's the way the U.S. operates entirely. I mean, the U.S. budget goes out for to provide aid to parents who need child care. Well, the first thing that does, it goes to a bunch of private think tanks who write up all these papers of what that child care should look like and how much it should cost. And then it goes to other people who are involved in the child care industry. So when it comes down to really changing child care to be useful to the man on the street or the woman on the street, there's no money left. I've lived that myth, that bullshit myth, all my life, and I can tell you, that's the way it operates. And that's the way, and so, but China doesn't play that game. Homie, don't play that. They want to see people who are going to really develop, use that money for development.
I think what I think Hamzat's analysis is missing is that he's looking at the different coups in a vacuum outside of the geopolitical context within which they happen, and he's not recognizing that there's Western imperialism that sees Africa as their property to exploit with impunity. And they don't have any interest of developing Africa. It's against their interest to allow Africa to develop. The West isn't wanting to develop Africa. The West wants to profit from Africa. China, on the other hand, is actually interested in seeing the West develop. And so if you have a coup leader that comes to power and he's overthrowing a pro-China government, say this government has done a bunch of deals with China to develop ports, schools, hospitals, and then a coup leader overthrows that government, like that's not a coup that anybody ought to support, because you're not supporting the development of Africa. But when the opposite happens, when you have a pro-Western puppet government that has no interest in developing his country and is only getting rich off of allowing and facilitating the West's exploitation of his country, when a nationalist regime overthrows that government, that's a coup we can support. And so
look at it this way. If you recall, in our engagement on the China situation in our last engagement, I spoke about what the direction for Africa should be. And the position I made at that time was that,
balance,
from my own perspective, we as Africans should not be just pro-West or pro-East or pro-anything. We should be pro-Africa.
Yes, non-aligned, yes.
And that's my position.
Hamzat.
Okay, I'm with you.
Before you respond perfectly, while we have you, because this brings in an interesting point I wanted to pick your brains on. But I wanted to say on your previous proposal of, I'm not trying to talk down to you, but it sounds like more technocracy to me than democracy, the points-based system for lawmakers. But that's me from the outside, from Europe, forget it. What I wanted to ask, that the recent, there's no show we can't do without at least mentioning Ukraine, and it's absolutely falling apart based on the Western headlines, like an absolute defeat of NATO, and Russia is shining. And I believe, with shots fired or without, the same is going to happen with regards to Taiwan or China versus the USA. I was wondering, what sort of effect does this have in Africa? We've all seen a lot of Russian flags at a lot of gatherings. I don't know how that relates to Nigeria, your country, at all. But does this change your equation that you brought in, the not with the West, not with the East, in the middle sort of balance? Has that changed at all?
No, you see, no, it doesn't change. There are considerable people who are pro-West in Africa and Nigeria, especially our government. Our government has been pro-West to a great extent.
Yes, we know
But
Tinubu
then
is.
there are other forces within government that are also pro-China and pro-Russia. Although it's easier to become pro-China because we are simply discussing development. But to become pro-Russia in Nigeria especially becomes a little bit complicated because many people do not perceive Russia from a development perspective. Rather, they perceive Russia, especially from a military perspective. And because partnering with Russia will amount to like taking a grand stand against the West.
Yes.
So
Yes, that's scary.
Nigerian leaders don't want to partner with Russia, but it's easier to partner with China to do a lot of things. But for people like me, I don't see a situation where our countries should be defined by who we partner with, not on our own basis, not based on our own agenda. Because even when you look at the situation of China, for example, in Nigeria, China has a lot of projects going on, right? We have railway projects, we have airport projects, we have a lot of projects. In fact, the CCECC of China is one of those companies that get a lot of contracts in Nigeria right now to develop a lot of infrastructure, right? But then, from a developmental orientational person who is also political in nature, almost all of these projects being developed by China is being done not just by China, even the workforce doing this job are also Chinese.
To an extent. To an extent.
Yes, that's why I say to a large extent. To a large extent, they are Chinese people.
What percentage would you say, Hamzat? Because I actually have the numbers.
I don't really have the percentage.
I have authoritative numbers. What's your perception of those numbers? Because authoritatively,
okay.
Yeah.
Let me give you before you give the percentage. Let me give you my perspective of it. You know, from the management level of this project, from the management and skilled level, there are going to be at least 60% Chinese at the management level, while the labor can be largely 80% Nigerian.
One could make the point they are teaching the next generation of managers, but plausibly.
More bankerly, that's their money. That's their development. Money.
Now you're getting where I'm going. Now you see, my perspective about development is you cannot be given development. You can grow and learn and build. If you contract out all your raw infrastructure to external forces, the money comes from them, the jobs goes to them, the money goes to them. And then all you are left with is the project. The people will, look at some of the projects that Chinese did. Go to some of those projects now. You see the locals in those areas, they are going to those projects, stealing, dismantling some of the projects, selling the parts for their personal survival. Now, at the end of the day, you have done the project, right? But it's not enhancing the development of the people. So, at the end of the day, if we did not initiate a process that developed the people along with the infrastructure eventually becomes useless. And we have many examples of that in Nigeria where there are excellent infrastructure, then that infrastructure decays with time and it does not bring the value it's supposed to bring. The people, they don't really, it's more like a white elephant project that's just contracting and that's all. So at the end of the day, it's not bringing, the project is there, but the impact it's supposed to have is not having it. So, from my perspective now.
But all you're doing is describing the neo-colonial and the colonial scam. That was, they built infrastructure to take out all the resources, and they didn't educate the people to keep up the infrastructure that they left behind, and it deteriorated. Look at India. It's just It's just rife with that.
I want
Then
to
you
bring
look
in.
at China, a country that borders India, and they have high-speed rail all over the country.
I want
And
to
in
say that
India, you got people riding on the trains on the outside, sitting on the roofs, clinging to these trains that date back to the British colonial period. That's all you're talking about. China does not do that. China is not operating that way. I mean, if you China hasn't been in the developmental stage long enough. I think if you look closely, you want to talk. We should talk about this pipeline that you brought up. I mean,
before that, can I also
I
add
really
something?
appreciate. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to say that I wanted to bring up 1990s Hungary when privatization took place, and most of the people in poverty, they stole basically the cables out of buildings to sell it to the metal market. That's because poverty was widespread. You know, that's what happens. But that was up to the government, our government. It's not up to China to alleviate poverty. Because they did it in their country. That's up to your government, you know, to make it ready for such things. I wanted to make that point.
I do not disagree. I do not disagree with you. What I'm saying is the people see the magnitude of the project in their vicinity, and they hear the amount of fund involved in it. And the government pays back China this money through wealth of the nation. Now, if this gigantic project is going to be situated here, it is only natural that it develops the people along some of the project that is being done. The people get along with it, but that is not happening. And
yeah,
when
whose
I
fault is that? China's?
Yeah, that's part of the conditions. That's part of the condition. That's part of the deal condition.
I'm afraid I don't think so. I don't believe that.
No, and let's talk about the pipeline.
I've seen contracts.
You said, and it was. I think it's really important that we talk about this. And you initiated it, and I think it's central to what's happening in the Sahel region in general, and especially in the Western Sahel, and that is this pipeline, which was initiated by none other than Halliburton, Kellogg, Brown and Root, and other Western corporations. Now it's all Western corporations involved. Now I've heard that the Niger coup leaders have negated their deal for that pipeline. Have you heard anything like that? They've negated their.
No, I haven't heard.
No, I haven't heard that. I've only heard it from a couple of people. I couldn't find any evidence of that. But
no,
the pipeline, you know, the pipeline is going to. Let me just explain it to people. It's going to bring liquid natural gas from Nigeria through Niger, through Algeria to the Mediterranean and to various coasts on the northern Mediterranean in Europe.
In Europe. Which is weird because American corporations were the ones you just listed. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, and so because it's essentially a Western project, and it has Kellogg, Brown and Root, that's Halliburton at its core. It's not likely to be blown up like the Nord Stream pipeline, though you never know, because at its peak it will represent 10% of the liquid natural gas produced in the world. That's a significant number, and it will help Europe weather its cold weather. But Niger is not happy. The coup people are not happy with the 10% that Niger is supposed to get, which traditionally, if Bazoum was still in power, I could guarantee you he and his cronies would have stolen most of that.
Well, he takes 9%, and then the people get the rest of the 1%.
I'm afraid that might be the case with the Chinese investments in your country as well. You can blame China all you like, but I mean, they could just renegotiate the contract.
Look at it. I'm not blaming China. Of course, I know the Chinese deal is better than the Western deal, but then I know we can get better if only we can organize ourselves better. So I cannot blame China for our own leadership inefficiency. But then I'm speaking from an optimistic perspective that this is what I think we should be pursuing, not that we are just becoming China's lackey or Western lackey, which we have always been. So we like and I model us. I see us having the capacity to be more like an Indian that is working with everyone, taking the best it can from both ends, and as well as like Turkey. So Nigeria has that capability, has that standing. If only we have people who understand geopolitics in a broader way, and
Look,
that's the perspective. So I wasn't against China.
you are the authentic on the ground Nigerian perspective, and we really respect that, and we're really grateful that you're sharing it.
Yes,
with us.
very
That's
much
what
so.
I'd like to say.
Yeah, thanks. So
And we're
now
yeah.
on the issue of the pipeline,
Okay.
the pipeline has been, it has not really gotten the attention in the media as part of the conversation on Niger Republic. The narrative has just been limited to military intervention or no military intervention. And more than 90% of the people are against military intervention. But somehow the ECOWAS seems to be pushing this agenda, and they think that's the right thing for them to do, which we are against, by the way. But from the information I've gathered on the pipeline, it has been a dream for Nigeria to do this pipeline for more than 40 years. And at some point, I think in 2002 or thereabout, there was move to actually initiate the process. But somehow the country feel that the investment is too huge for the return that is likely to come from gas supply to Europe. Because at the time, before the breakout of the Ukraine war, I think gas is sold for about $4.
Nord Stream, yep.
That's right. Exactly. $4. Too cheap to
And
produce.
yes, now it seems like, okay, if we are investing these huge billions when we have so many other priority, that does not seem to be a good deal. So, and that was the reason why Nigeria had never pursued it seriously, despite the interest for the past 40 years. So it was the Ukraine situation that made the country seem like, okay, this seems to be a good deal now that gas is going for like $20, and the tendency of it coming down in some years is not certain. So they felt that if we made a more serious, investment in this pipeline, it has a tendency of bringing a long-term benefit to the country. And that's what is driving the faster pace of approach, the quick mobilization of resources, and the ready-made market in Europe in absence of Russia's gas. And, all of this, motivated the need and the interest of Nigeria to pursue this gas initiative in the first place.
So
And
events on the grand chessboard in the wider world did have an effect in Nigeria, just not the way I would have expected.
Right. But what concerns me is that the money's not in the pipeline itself. It's a gamble on all natural resources. Tomorrow they could discover the greatest field of liquid natural gas in New Jersey or something. You never know what's going to happen. But the money is in building the pipeline, and the people that get the money for building the pipeline are Kellogg, Brown and Root, Halliburton. All the other ancillary countries involved. Yes,
that has become an issue in Nigeria, actually.
Right, it should be, because the bribery, the hundreds of millions of dollars that U.S. and European corporations have used to bribe local officials have been legion as far as this pipeline goes. Even the SEC filed a complaint about Nigerian officials, 2008 or something, and they won in international court. And there was a $120 million judgment. So the money that's changing hands, it's like the arms industry. The U.S. doesn't, U.S. arms makers, they don't care if they send shit to Ukraine and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians die. They're making their money. It's the same with the pipeline. They don't care if it ever produces any natural gas, or that if natural gas stays high enough to keep production, or if it rusts away because natural gas goes back down to $4, a cubic meter. They don't care. The money is in the building of the pipeline. And so that has to be factored in. I mean, it hasn't produced any money yet, any real money, any real profits. I know it's
Yeah,
if they did,
this is an issue for Nigeria, and the reason is that Nigeria is desperately in search of foreign exchange. We are so desperate right now for foreign exchange that any deal that we're going to do, quick deal that is going to be fetching the country some dollars to offset some of our liabilities is what the government wants to pursue, especially this new government that we have. The new president of Nigeria is someone who has capacity in economic development.
Okay.
And he's looking for resources to be able to pioneer good initiatives for the country. So he's desperately interested in this pipeline issue. And I believe that's one of the reasons why he actually felt that there is need to like go into Niger militarily, because he believes that once a Russia-backed junta is in charge of Niger Republic, it becomes extremely difficult for this project to sail through, being that Russia is also going to be the victim and is already the victim of this economically of gas supply in Europe. So, and it's just so difficult, because when you're looking at the economic situation and you're looking at the political stability from this angle, it's really so difficult for us. And although we don't know, we have made all of the effort we can, but then the decision makers seems to be looking at things from different perspectives, and it's so difficult right now that I'm scared that they may likely go into this Niger with so much bitterness from the people, not only in Niger Republic, but across the continent. And it's going to be like a difficult situation for us going forward. Because in addition to just this gas situation, this continent also will become, arms proliferation will skyrocket in a way that we never imagined.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Yes,
Hamza,
horrible possibility.
I'm conscious of all the time that you've given to us, and thank you for that. I wish you nothing but basically luck with this gambit and peace on Nigerian soil. I wanted to say that maybe it would be worthwhile to pay attention to the East African countries, because 2 of them have joined BRICS, which of course is Egypt and Ethiopia now, and see how things roll from there. It might be interesting to all of us. And again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
glad to. Yeah, I'll join you some other time. Thank you so much.
Yes, very
Take
much.
care,
Have
Hamza.
you back.
Thanks for your
Absolutely.
analysis.
Thank you.
You're our voice on the ground.
All right, lads. Well, I don't know if we want to end on any other topic, but I think that was a lot from the Nigerian perspective, and very good insights as well as the odd ones out, I'd say.
Yeah, we never got around to Tinubu's checkered past, but
I didn't want to. You understand?
you didn't want to engage that.
Yeah. And I also don't want to end on on a bad note. So you guys,
You are such a nice guy.
Have to bring up something better, because it's a historic day for another reason. Because Japan has already been dumping the Fukushima nuclear
Oh my God.
water for the last 7 or 8 hours since midday Japan time, and everybody's in an uproar.
What's that? They've been what?
Dumping the Fukushima treated wastewater. Do you know what? Not Fumio Kishida, but his economic minister did. He did an Obama. He went down there to eat seafood. See, I can eat it. You can eat it. It's safe. It was absolutely.
Is that why the sashimi so large at where we go to eat? Huge sashimi.
Yeah,
I wonder if they're gonna import it from the Sea of Japan still. China has banned all exports of Japanese seafood, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and Fumio Kishida went on air later on Japanese television to demand immediately the removal of these so-called sanctions. He said these bans. So I don't know how he thinks in a position to demand, but it started with Taiwan and Shanghai. They banned all food, from Japan, not just seafood and fish products. So it's very
I mean,
interesting. They were protests. People can find the videos on different Telegram channels and YouTube all over Korea, both Koreas, all over China and Japan itself. Huge protests.
The other subject we did not cover on Nigeria is the Nigerian Delta, and where the oil exports take place. It's terribly polluted. I mean,
it looks
as
horrific.
soon as this liquid natural gas pipeline became de rigueur in the news, there are many citizens groups, like I would imagine, like
Hamzat's
rose up and said, you've got to do something about this. It's everything from the major corporations dumping oil to pirates tapping into the oil
people
lines
used to
and
earn
stealing
their
it.
living in the Niger Delta fishing in those what is that environment called? It's not Everglades, but it's the environment's
Delta.
totally destroyed. The environment's
Delta,
totally destroyed.
yeah.
You can't earn a living by fishing anymore, and so
Right.
they're just all those
That's
people
why-
are trying to figure something else out.
Like
That's
the
why
Somali
Somalia had-
pirates.
That's why they had pirates. Exactly.
Yeah.
We think alike. Shit, I had something, but I lost it. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No.
You know, my bladder's so full, I can barely have a
We've
thought.
been going for a long time. But
All right,
okay.
guys.
As a final thought, because we've connected BRICS, a little bit of Ukraine, a little bit of Japan, a little bit of everything. I think Africa, the gift, not the gift box. Sorry, what am I going to say? The resource rich, the richest continent on the earth right now is going through a Cold War phase. There is an East Africa emerging, West Africa with the West, and the middle, as Hamzat says, is trying to play the Turkey game. It was very strange to me that he aspires to be Turkey, which I don't think it's a very good thing in the long run to go with the East, go with the West. But it will be a very interesting dynamic, I think, in
the nature of both. Like you're ignoring the inherent nature within the West as exploitative, and the inherent nature within the East of peace through mutual prosperity and development.
Yeah,
So,
on my left shoulder.
Why do you want half and half? You shouldn't.
On my left shoulder, I have a cute hamster. It gives me warmth. On my right shoulder, I have a scorpion, which is designed to sting me. And people say I'm going to play with both.
Nkrumah says he said we don't look to the east or we don't look to the west. We look forward, and of course, the West killed him.
Yeah,
that was
they
what
killed
he had
him for that. That'll get you killed by the West.
One more thing, if SL Canton, one of our, I think we could say favorite guests out there, has mentioned last time on Twitter that this BRICS conference looks to him like the Bandung conference of 1955, he will be glad to know that President Ramaphosa of South Africa made the exact same statement. And I was amazed by that.
That was a good
correlating the two.
Yep.
I mean,
yep, he did.
Yeah, the first one didn't pan out so well because of the efforts of the West, but hopefully the second one will learn from that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will be back on Tuesday. See you guys.